Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. Let me know if you can see and hear me. If you haven't yet, please open up the chat. All right, audio and visual. Sorry, I didn't have the audio on for our intro video. I apologize. Um, but welcome. This is the Flying Changes webinar. I'm so excited to talk to you about flying changes today. This is one of my all-time favorite topics. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes here. So if you haven't yet, please open up the chat and type in where in the world you are watching from. I'm in California. It's a beautiful fall day, although the days are definitely getting shorter this time of year, which is definitely hard as horse people. I think we enjoy the long summer days. All right. Hi, Susan. Hi, Julie. Tina from Oklahoma. Awesome. Hello, Emma, Wisconsin. Fantastic. I always think it's so cool, Australia, that we have people from all over the world here today learning about flying changes. So it's officially 12 o'clock. Welcome to the Flying Changes webinar. Hello, I'm Amelia. If you're new here, welcome. I am super passionate about flying changes. I think it is such a magical feeling when you get a clean flying change from your horse because it's like the ultimate test of connection and partnership and harmony. But unfortunately, a lot of horses and a lot of riders get stuck and they can't teach their horse the flying changes. And unless you have a flying change, it's hard in dressage. You get stuck at second level, you can't move up through the levels. Flying changes are also important in other disciplines. So let me know in the chat if we have any jumper riders or Western riders, or really, flying changes are important for all of them. So couple of announcements before we get started. First of all, go ahead and open up the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. We're going to be doing a lot of interactions in the chat, so you're going to want to have that open. Second of all, turn off your distractions, get a pen and paper. I have so much to cover today, so I'm going to be trying to pack in as much as possible into about a 60 to 90-minute presentation for today. Next thing is that my incredible team here is in the chat. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat. They will do their best to answer them. And then we will have a little bit of a time for a Q&A at the end of this presentation. I always appreciate my team being here on a Sunday. So thank you to all of you. First of all, I wanted to tell you a story. So when I first moved to California, and I was young and I was like, I always got the difficult horses. I always got the problem horses. And so I heard a lot of stories about this horse named Sparky. And Sparky didn't really have the best reputation. So Sparky had sent his owner to the hospital multiple times. Sparky had been through several different trainers. He was a rescue POA, Appaloosa, and people were starting to wonder, like, oh, should we give up on Sparky? Like, he really didn't have a good reputation. So Sparky came to my barn and he certainly had some holes in his training. He didn't really understand how to go round, and he'd put his head up and he'd spin around, and his canter was a mess. But Sparky was really, really smart and he was really talented. And I just started chipping away at things. I had a system for how to train horses, and step by step by step, I got Sparky round. I got him to pick up the canter. I got him to understand his leads. He learned his simple changes. And finally, Sparky learned to do flying changes. And I can still remember the first time that I took Sparky to a show and we did our first level test and I got clean flying changes and I was elated. It was like the most magical thing ever to take a horse that had gone from being labeled as like dangerous and no one could ride him, and he was labeled as, problematic, to now he was doing a flying change, which is a moment of real connection and partnership with your horse. For a flying change to happen, your horse has to be paying attention and on the aids and through and supple and connected, and like everything has to be right to do a flying change, which is part of why it is so difficult. And in the end, I got Sparky all the way up to the I1 and I was able to do like 12 one-tempi changes and it was so cool. But here's the thing. Sparky was not the first horse that I learned how to do the flying changes on, or that I taught the flying changes, right? And so through a lot of trial and error, I have developed a step-by-step system, a blueprint to teach the flying changes. And that is what a lot of you are missing, is you maybe haven't ridden flying changes before, or you've never taught a horse how to do flying changes, or you don't understand the steps to take your horse through in order so that your horse can understand how to do a flying change. And here's the truth is that horses are incredible and they're willing and they're kind. And if they understand what you want them to do, they will do it. So if you're struggling with your flying changes, it is because your horse doesn't understand what you're asking, okay? It's not because your horse is being bad or naughty. It's because you, in some way, aren't communicating it to them what they are supposed to do. And a lot has to happen in a flying change, which we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited that you're here today. My goal for today is to help you understand the step-by-step process to teach the flying changes. I want to save you time. I want to save you struggle and effort. And I really want you to be successful with your horse. So give me a thumbs up if you are excited for today's webinar on the flying changes. And let me pull up my slides. Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up flying up my screen, which is fantastic. All right, if you can't tell, this is definitely something that I am very passionate about. And gosh, I wish that when I was first learning how to train flying changes, I wish that I had a webinar like this to come to. Okay, all righty. So today we are going to be diving into the step-by-step process to teaching flying changes. Go ahead and let me know A, B, C, or D. Where are you on your flying changes journey? You're dreaming of riding flying changes. You're stuck. You can't get a change. Your horse knows the changes, but you don't. Or D, you can do flying changes, but they need a lot of work. Go ahead and let me know in the chat. Okay, I see we have people answering all of the above. So good. Whether or not you have never tried to do a change, or you've attempted a few, or you're learning them, you are in the right place, because today we're going to be talking about everything flying changes. My promise to you today is that by the end of this webinar, you will understand the blueprint to follow so that you can ride flying changes on your horse. And here's the thing. You can do this. Never underestimate the importance of smaller steps. So that on the right there is a picture of Sparky, the little problem child that I just told you the story of. So when Sparky first came into training with me, I never dreamed that he would be able to do flying changes. I was barely able to stay on him. I was barely able to canter him. I really couldn't do anything with Sparky. But since I had a system, and since I stayed consistent with Sparky, and I broke it down into these little tiny baby steps, and I started out by just working on roundness and softness, and then the trot canter transition, and all these little baby steps led me to be able to doing one tempi changes. And so I put this in here for inspiration for those of you who are like, I want to come to this webinar. I want to do flying changes, but it's pretty far out of reach, because the truth of the matter is that you can learn how to do a flying change, and so can your horse. So here's what I need from you though. I need you to commit to take consistent action. So if you're committed to taking action, can everyone write the word action for me in the chat? Because learning and being here today is great, but it's not really that helpful unless you actually take action on at least one thing that you are going to learn today. So here's the agenda for today. Step one, what is the flying change? What are the aids for a flying change? Second thing is how any horse, your horse, can learn to do a clean flying change. Secret number three is why on the diagonal is the worst place to train flying changes. So you do not want to just point your horse across the diagonal and pray that a flying change will happen, that is not going to work for you. And then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about my Flying Changes Made Simple course if you would like a bit more help. And we will have time for a Q&A. All right, I see a lot of action takers in the chat. If you're new here, hello, I'm Amelia. My mission is Dressage for All, and I am so passionate about helping you along your journey with your horse. We have hundreds of riders here today from all over the world, and I just love helping riders of all different levels and disciplines and all different breeds, because dressage really does give you such a solid foundation of communication and trust with your horse so that you can do whatever your dream is. As a bonus for being here today, stick around to the end. We do have a free ride along podcast on getting you ready for the flying changes. So that's an audio recording that you can play during your next ride. And I take you through some prerequisites. So to start off with, what is a flying change? A flying change is performed in one stride with the front and hind legs changing at the same moment. The change of the leading front and hind legs takes place during the moment of suspension. Okay, that's why flying changes are so hard, right? So let me know, do you think, would it be helpful to see a video of a flying change? I think it would be, because we really want to have a picture in our mind of what we are looking for. So let me go ahead and pull up. I have put together a quick little video for us to take a peek at some real life flying changes. This is my horse, Kensington. Kensington had a really, really hard time learning the flying changes. He's got a big canter, but he got them. So here we are doing our 3 tempi changes. There's a flying change.
Sorry to interrupt, Amelia. Will you make sure it's optimized for video? It's just a bit chunky.
Oh yeah, I thought it was. Hang on. Let me try again. It is
It's just such a beautiful video. I want to make sure it can be seen properly.
okay. It was optimized. I'm not sure what is going on. Hopefully that's better. Hopefully you can see. All right, so we're starting off here. These are 3 tempi changes. And here it is in slow motion. So you'll see how Kensington, he basically pushes off his inside front leg. He leaps up in the air and he does a flying change. So here, I think it's going to happen in the next stride. So you'll see him push off that right front, jump up in the air, and then he's on the left lead canter. So you can see how the left front and the left hind leg are leading here. And again, this is in slow motion, so that might be why it looks a little bit lurchy. Okay, so here he pushes off the left front leg. He leaps up in the air, and now the right front and the right hind leg are coming forward. Okay, here's a line of 2 tempis. One, oh, and here we go into 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, let's watch that again, because at the end that started to go kind of fast. So here we go. Here is our line of 2 tempi changes into the 1 tempi changes. Let me know if you all can see that. 2 tempi changes into a line of 1 tempi changes. All right, so let me know in the chat if that was helpful, if you now have a visual of what some tempi changes look like. Like I mentioned, Kensington was tricky to teach the flying changes to. And I remember there was definitely a distinct moment where I came home after like a especially difficult day, and I told my husband, I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to teach Kensington the flying changes, but he did eventually get it, which is so cool. And now he's up to even schooling 1 tempi changes. All right, so now that we have a little bit of a visual, let's dive in to a bit more about the aids and the actual training of how I got Kensington to be able to do the flying changes. Go ahead and let me know in the chat. I'd love to hear what breed is your horse? And what's so cool about flying changes is that a flying change of lead at the canter is just a horse's natural way to rebalance himself. Every horse can do a flying change. Even foals do them in the field. The trick is really just to get the horse to do the change when we want them to do a change. So, what are the aids for a flying change? How was I cueing Kensington to do a flying change? Well, let's talk about what the aid is not. So, the aid for a flying change is not changing direction, and that's important. The aid for a flying change is not pulling on the inside rein or changing the bend in your horse, because then your horse will start to anticipate. The aid for a flying change is also not twisting in your body or throwing your body to the side, because again, that's going to throw your horse off balance. The aid for the flying change is your leg position. It's as simple as that. So the aid for the flying change is the same as the aid that you would ask your horse to canter. So if you're trotting and you're going to ask for the left lead canter, you're going to put your right leg behind the girth, and that is going to be the cue for the left lead canter. That is also the cue for the flying change to the left lead. So if you look at this picture of Kensington, what lead am I on in this picture of Kensington? This is a little bit of a trick question. Okay, Emma got it right. I am on the left lead canter. The reason I said that it's a trick question is because Kensington is in counter canter. And how do you know that he's in left lead canter? Well, because his left front and his left hind leg are leading. And because if you look at my leg position, my outside leg, which in this picture is my right leg, is behind the girth. So if I wanted Kensington to do a flying change, my cue would be to switch my leg position. So I'd bring my right leg would go forward and my left leg would go back for the right lead canter. So give me a thumbs up if this makes sense, if you're clear that your leg position is the cue for the flying change. So inside leg at the girth, outside leg behind the girth, that is the aid for a flying change. Now, the reason that flying changes is so hard is because flying changes require an instant response to the aid. So let's think about this. If you're riding along and let's say that you're in the right lead or the left lead canter, because here I'm in the left lead canter and I'm going to do a flying change to the right. So first of all, in your brain, when you're riding, you have to think, okay, we're going to do a flying change. Then that signal has to go from your brain to your leg. You have to change your leg position at the right moment. Then your horse has to feel and respond. So it goes from your leg to your horse's brain. Your horse has to jump up in midair and switch all 4 feet and land back on the ground, all in that moment of suspension. That's crazy, right? That is a lot that has to happen in a millisecond. So when you think about it, now you understand like why flying changes are so hard, but also why they're so magical. I mean, when you can get a clean flying change, that means that number one, you're in control of your body, that you've given the aid correctly with the right timing, which is really cool. And that also means that your horse is super tuned in and listening to you, that your horse is responding instantly to your aids, which I don't know about you, but I just think that that is so cool to think about. So let me know in the chat, how would you describe flying changes? Like, what are some verbs we could use to describe flying changes? They're magical, they feel like you're flying, they're a true sign of partnership, they're fun, they're exhilarating, they're bouncy. Yes, they're skipping with energy. Okay, I love it. Alrighty, so we have covered so far what is a flying change and how to ask for a flying change. Next, let's move on to how any horse can learn to do a clean flying change. And this is where we're going to start diving into a little bit more of the training. So Let me know in the chat, what is your main discipline? I know we have a lot of dressage riders here. If you're a dressage rider, you know that to move up to third level, that is where we start our flying change journey. Eventers, you guys need to do flying changes between jumps. Um, for Western riders, I know reiners have to do flying changes in the reining patterns. So it really is a movement that we do in all disciplines. And as much as flying changes can be fun and exhilarating, when you're first teaching the flying changes, they can be pretty intimidating. They can be pretty scary. So let me know in the chat if you've tried teaching the flying changes, how you might describe that as going. On the left there, that's a horse that I was teaching the flying changes to, Leo. You can see he's doing a handstand with his front legs crossed and kicking up his hind legs. One of the most difficult horses I ever taught the flying changes to was a horse named Trumpet, and he was part thoroughbred, very hot, very explosive. I can still feel the fear in my stomach when my trainer, Sue, at the time, she would be like, okay, today we're going to work on the flying changes. And I just dreaded it because I knew when I asked for the flying change, a lot of times he would buck or kick up or run off. And so it is sometimes part of the process of teaching the flying changes that they go through this exuberant phase. But the thing is that the better your basics and the more solid your system is, the easier it's going to be to teach the flying changes. So at this point in my career, I think it's more than dozens of horses. I've taught a lot of horses how to do the flying changes, and they're all very different. So some of them, it's pretty easy. Like they pick up the flying changes relatively easy. Like Natasha here, this black mare, she picked up the flying changes super easy. Other horses like Kensington and Sparky, it was definitely a little bit more challenging. But here's what's super important about the flying changes. And I cannot stress this enough, especially for those of you who are here today and you're like, well, I'd really like to do a flying change, but I'm just not quite there yet. Is that your basics are so important. The more solid your basics, the easier it's going to be to teach your horse to do the flying changes. And I'm going to dive in a little bit more in the next slides about what are those basics, what do you need to perfect before working on the flying changes. But what I can't stress enough is that every canter transition that you do, every moment that you spend in the canter, you really want to think about increasing your standard for that, that you want to get your horse rounder, more supple, straighter, more active, more engaged. And the better that you really focus and improve your basics, the easier it's going to be when it comes time to doing the flying changes. I think the biggest mistake that I see people making is one day they wake up and they're like, okay, today we're doing flying changes. I need to move up to third level. And they haven't you don't understand how important the basics are. So work on your basics. Let's dive into what are the basics. So the first and most simple basic is the canter rhythm. So the canter is a 3-beat rhythm. Beat 1 is the outside hind on the ground. Beat 2 is the inside hind and the outside front. And beat 3 is the inside front. So how many of you count the rhythm when you are cantering your horse? So that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I see a lot of yeses. That's really important because counting and feeling the rhythm helps you to get in sync so that way, number one, your horse's canter quality starts to improve, especially if your horse has a tendency to get a little slow or lazy or forebeated. And then it's also really important because when you ask for the flying change, you need to be in sync with the rhythm. So it's like canter, 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 aid. If you ask at the wrong moment, your horse is not going to be able to do the flying change during the moment of suspension. So homework number one, count the rhythm. Now, here's another one, especially for those of you who here has a horse that trots through the flying change. So you ask for a change, and either they do this one little sneaky trot step or they don't do anything at all. They just keep cantering the same. Okay, I see some my horse does that. So what you really want to focus on is your canter quality. And when we're talking about canter quality, we really mean two things. So one is the moment of suspension. Look here, this is Natasha. Natasha is a Grand Prix mare that I have, and she had the best flying changes. I was actually able to do two tempi changes on a circle line into a line of one tempi changes in our freestyle. She was so handy with the flying changes. Why? Because her canter quality was so good. She had so much volume and suspension and air time. Look at how much air time she has here in the canter. So that gave her more time to sequence her legs for the new lead, right? If you don't have any air time, there's no time for your horse to be able to jump from one lead to the other. The other thing we really want when we talk about canter quality is activity and energy. So, in order to get this moment of suspension, our horses can or needs to be really energetic, kind of like a hamster on a wheel. Like your horse has to be really wanting to go canter, 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 jumping, 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 so that then you can get the flying change to happen. Okay, so here's one of our students in the Facebook group. She says, when I try a flying change, absolutely nothing happens. Okay, so Catherine, those are two really good tips to help you work on the rhythm and the suspension, and that is going to help you. Now, the third basic that we need to have before we start working on flying changes is the simple change. And what is a simple change? So, a simple change is where you go canter, walk 3 or 4 steps, canter on the other lead. Simple changes show up at second level. And the reason that simple changes are a really important prerequisite for flying changes is because it's the same aids. So remember how I said that the aid for a flying change is the same as the aid for canter. So by practicing left lead canter, walk, right lead canter, walk, left lead canter, walk, right lead canter, walk, and then being able to really speed that up where you go left lead canter, walk 2 steps, right lead canter, walk 2 steps, left lead canter, walk 2 steps. That's going to help you to rehearse the aid and also to make sure that your horse really understands the aid. I can still remember when I was trying to teach Trumpet the flying changes. And he was one of the first horses that I think he was the first horse I'd ever taught flying changes to. And I hadn't ridden a lot of like confirmed horses that knew the flying changes. And I can still remember my trainer, Sue. I was sitting on Trumpet. She was standing in front of me and she was trying to explain to me the aids for the flying change. And she was like, oh, you've got to do this with your new inside rein and bring your new inside leg forward and give on the new inside rein and hold on the outside rein and your outside leg goes back. And I was so confused. Like I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is so confusing. I'm never going to be able to understand how to cue for the canter. I don't know if any of you have ever felt that way where you're like, I don't even understand. How am I supposed to ask for the flying change? So if you're struggling with that, if that's a hurdle for you, like Monica, Paula, okay, go back and work on the simple changes. The walk, canter, walk, canter, walk, canter. And once you have that, it's going to help you to understand the aid for the change. And it's also going to get your horse more collected and more active on the hind leg so that they can understand the aid. Okay, so remember how I had my iceberg analogy and I told you that you need to start working on the basics. And then I told you that your basics are not good enough. So let me know in the chat, when you ride a canter transition, what does your horse do? Does your horse hollow? Does your horse put their head up? Does your horse canter a stride or two later, like a little bit of a delayed reaction? Does your horse anticipate and hollow? Okay, you've got to fix that. because whatever problem that you're having in the canter transition is going to be 10,000 times worse when you go to ride a flying change. And that is what I mean by your basics have to be perfect. It's not enough that you can pick up the canter. Really work on perfecting the transition into the canter, and especially with late flying changes. So late flying changes are something that are really hard to fix. Let me know in the chat if any of you have horses that do late flying changes. It's not impossible. You can fix it, but the better your basics are before you start teaching the changes, and the more that you can avoid your horse learning how to do late flying changes, the better. So you don't want your horse to learn how to do a late flying change. However, for those of you who have horses that are late behind, go back and really work on the activity and the reaction to the canter aid, and that's going to help you to fix the late change. So here's one of our students, Jennifer. She says, if you consistently practice your walk canter transition, then you can do a flying change. The aid is the same. And I just wanted to put a little proof in here. Guys, this does work. Go back, focus on that walk canter transition, and it will help to improve your flying changes. And remember that flying changes are a natural movement. So don't make it a big deal. But what you do want to do is you do want to really solidify the basics. And I didn't cover all of them. There are a lot more basics and a lot more different exercises that you want to practice with your horse before you start teaching the flying changes. But the more that you can break it down and the more that you can teach your horse all the little pieces that they need to understand before you ask for the flying change, the more that you're setting your horse up for success. And that's something that when I was first learning flying changes, or when I was first teaching the first few horses that I taught the flying changes, I didn't really realize how important the basics were and all of those little pieces before I started. And then the thing with flying changes is that you don't want to start them wrong. You don't want to mess them up at the beginning, because if you start them wrong before your horse is ready, or if you start them with the wrong approach, it's really easy for both you and your horse to get a little bit scared or worried, or to make them into a big deal when it really shouldn't be. So let me know in the chat, give me a thumbs up if you're inspired to work on your basics. And here's the thing is, I know and I truly believe that if you perfect these basics, you and your horse can do a flying change. So type in the chat if you believe, type in I believe if you believe that you and your horse can do a flying change. Maybe some of you still don't believe. That's okay too. You can type that in the chat. But here's two of our students. So Renee and her horse Icarus, and then also Hannah and Valiente. These two riders have worked really, really hard with two horses that were not the easiest to learn the flying changes, and they were able to get those flying changes on their horses, which is so cool. Okay, I see a lot of you say, I believe, I just need to make it happen on my aids. Okay, well, that leads us right into the third part of this presentation. And this is a big one, which is why across the diagonal is the worst place to train the flying changes. And you might be saying, well, Amelia, in the tests, that's where you do the flying change, right? You do the flying change a lot of times across the diagonal. But the problem with the diagonal is that really quickly your horse starts to anticipate the flying change. And then they're likely to just like rush off or do it late, or it just doesn't happen behind. And the other problem with on the diagonal is that it doesn't really help to set you up for success. It doesn't help to prepare your horse for the flying changes. So at some point, you say, okay, Amelia, I've worked on my basics And I heard you say that they have to be perfect, that your standard probably isn't high enough. And that's something that's hard. I was talking with Nicole on my team this week, and she's like, but they just don't know what they don't know. And you really don't know how good your basics have to be until you've taught a few horses the flying changes or until you've done a few flying changes. So really perfect those basics. Make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row, that you can ride a perfect walk canter transition, that your horse is straight and collected and active and all of those things. And then at some point, you have to try a flying change. And I know it's scary. It's kind of like babies learning to walk at first. You know that when you're first learning and when your horse is first learning the flying changes, they are not going to be perfect. They're going to have late changes, or they're not going to change at all, or they're going to anticipate, or they're going to swap and then swap back, or they're going to kick up. But the better your basics and the more that you understand how to go back to the basics once you've identified the problem you're having, the easier it will be for you and your horse. So let me know in the chat, when you ask for a flying change, what happens? Like, what does your horse do? Here's a picture of, on the right here, this is Kensington, and you can see how Kensington is like kicking his croup up. And I'm not really riding very well in this picture either. I'm not sure why I'm looking down and my butt is flying out of the saddle, but obviously I'm not really helping him to keep his croup down. Okay, so I see slows down and is late behind, cross canters, gets faster, nothing happens. Okay, here's some more kicking up, croup high, bucking, leaping through the air, bolting. So there's a lot that can go wrong when you ask for a flying change for sure. And that's the hard part, right? Is because everything happens so fast, and then every horse has just a little bit of a different evasion when it comes time to ask for the flying change. So, should we just ride across the diagonal and pray that we get a flying change? I think you all know that the answer is no. My husband actually had a horse where they had basically tried to teach the horse the flying changes by going across the diagonal, and then they had someone with a lunge whip that would like tap the horse when it would go across the diagonal, and that horse was terrified of the flying changes. I mean, understandably, right? But just thinking, oh, I pray this is going to happen, that's not the best plan to set you and your horse up for success. And I'm all about success. So let's figure out how we can make it a little bit more successful. Here's one of our students, Celia, and she is so cute. She says, Amelia, you articulate this so well. No one understands the footfalls for the change. You wouldn't get this from the hunter world. They would just have you canter across the diagonal over a pole and hope that you got a change. We've definitely all been there where it's just like, okay, go across the diagonal and just pray that it's going to happen. And if you're on a trained horse that knows the flying changes and that's really well balanced, it might happen. But let's face it, most of us aren't on a perfectly trained horse that knows tempi changes. So how can we set it up a little bit better, both for us and for our horse, so that we can be successful? And that's one thing that's really important to me, whether you're doing the changes already or whether it's something that you aspire to do, is in training, the more that you can break it down and make it simple and really teach yourself and teach your horse the correct way to do it, the more success that you will have. So, setting you and your horse up for success. And again, like we mentioned, cross the diagonal, not such a great place because there's just too much distance there and it doesn't help to set your horse up. So, this is my personal favorite exercise to teach the flying changes. I learned this exercise from a clinician named Morten Thompson. And Morten Thompson is from Denmark. He's an Olympian. But what I loved about Morten is he was really about breaking it down and helping the horse to understand the cue, right? Because if you cue your horse for a change and they don't do the change, like if you change your leg position and they go faster, they trot, nothing happens, then we have to figure out how to explain that, how to change the cue or how to imprint it differently in our horse's mind so that they understand what we want. So I was riding a horse named Gatsby in the clinic, and Gatsby was, I think he was maybe 5 or 6, and he was pretty green. I was like, I don't think I'm ready to do flying changes on this horse. I don't know if my basics are good enough. But Morton taught me this shallow loop serpentine exercise, which is now my all-time favorite exercise for teaching the flying changes. For those of you who ride training level or who have ridden training level, you may recognize this shallow loop serpentine. So this shallow loop serpentine shows up at training level test 3, which is what I think is so cool about dressage and many of these patterns is that they build on each other. So you start learning it in training 3, or yes, it's in first level test 3 for counter canter. And then you can also use this same pattern to teach the flying changes. Let me show you how. So for the flying changes, what you're going to do is you're going to ride the shallow loop serpentine with simple changes each time you cross the center line. So here, we're going to start at A. We're going to be on right lead canter. So right lead canter, we're starting our shallow loop serpentine. At the quarter line, the star with the white middle, that represents a simple change. Right lead canter, walk. Left lead canter, go out to X, come back towards the rail, walk, and then pick up the right lead canter again. So one thing that's really important with the exercises for the flying changes is that you always start first with simple changes. And think of your simple changes like X marks the spot. So your simple changes are going to be placed at the exact position where later on you're going to ask your horse to the flying change. That's really important. So you always start with the exercise by doing the simple changes at the exact place where later on you're going to do the flying change. And you might spend a few weeks doing the pattern with simple changes until your simple changes, remember simple changes canter, walk, canter, until that's really fluid and easy and straight. And then you're going to ask for a flying change where that solid blue star is coming back to the rail. So I know that was a lot to take in, but the big takeaway here, give me a thumbs up if you followed that. The big takeaway here is that you always want to practice your simple changes at the same place where later on you're going to ask for a flying change so that your horse starts to associate, oh, at the quarter line, I pick up the canter. At the quarter line, I pick up the canter. And then that way, all you have to do is instead of walking 2 steps, you just change your legs and you've got that new lead. And that's really important. So when I was in that clinic with Morton and he taught me this exercise, I was able to get the flying change on Gatsby sooner than I thought because he helped me to imprint in Gatsby's mind the cue and the aid. And then Gatsby was able to achieve it, which is super cool. But here's the thing. You need more than just that one exercise because what starts to happen, as we know with flying changes, is your horse starts to anticipate. And anticipation is really the enemy of a clean flying change because the second that your horse is, oh my gosh, she's gonna ask, they're not waiting for your aid. And inevitably, your horse is going to go on the forehand or only change in front or do that little trot step or rush off or something's going to happen. So you do need to have a bunch of different patterns that you can then change up and go to if you feel like your horse starts to anticipate in that one place. Okay, I've got a lot of thumbs up. I know that I'm going through a lot really quickly in this webinar, but I just wanted to try to pack in as much information so that I can really help you with your horse to make some headway towards your flying changes. So, this is great, Amelia, but what if I like do the pattern and I do my simple changes and it just doesn't work? My horse just doesn't change. And I'll tell you a little bit of a traumatic story. So, I was at a show and it was Friday and I was supposed to show on Saturday and Sunday. And I was riding a horse named Catalina. And I, for some reason, just couldn't get the flying change to happen. And it was like the wires were crossed and she wasn't hearing my aid and it was a disaster. And I was riding with this German trainer and he kept saying diagonal again, diagonal again, diagonal again, like, and it wasn't working. Like it was so terrible because Catalina was all frazzled and nervous and tense, and I was all frazzled and nervous and tense. And I was like, I have to show tomorrow, and there's no way. Like, this is not happening. This is not working. And so later on, after that guy, I was working with a different trainer. I was working with Johanneman. And Johanneman, whenever I was on a horse that I was struggling and the flying change wasn't happening for whatever reason. I remember one time I was riding my Grand Prix horse Harvey and the one tempi changes weren't working. And instead of just do it again, do it again, do it again, he was like, no, walk. Okay, let's just go back to walk, canter, left lead, walk, canter, right lead, walk, canter, left lead, walk, canter, right lead. And that approach works so much better because you need that time to go back to the basics, take a breath for yourself, mostly. Explain to your horse, okay, this is my aid for left lead canter, walk. This is my aid for right lead canter, walk. This is my aid for left lead canter, walk. And then that way, when you give the aid for a flying change, you and your horse are a bit more relaxed. The walk canters really help to get your horse engaged on the hind leg, active, and then your flying change is so much more successful. So let me know if that made sense. Give me a thumbs up if you're still following this. And if maybe you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I've been guilty of just doing bad change after bad change, but now I understand how going back to the basics in that situation would probably have been more successful for me and for my horse. And remember that if your horse doesn't change, so if the flying change isn't working, it's super important not to get emotional or upset or desperate or to think that you should just give up and never ride again, which we all 100% have been there. Like I mentioned with Kensington, it took me, I think, a good 9 months to really confirm the changes on him. And there was a day where I was just like, I am never gonna get it with this horse. Like I can't. It's really frustrating. But don't do that. You just go back to the basics, focus your time on the basics, and chip away at it. I think that that's the biggest thing, especially for those of you that are feeling like, oh my gosh, I really want to do the changes, but I'm so far away. Now is the time to really start chipping away at your basics and really work on your canter, work on your position, work on the activity, work on the transition, because that way, with those little baby steps, you will be ready someday. Um, and remember, if you can ride a canter transition, you can do a flying change. The aid is the same. You're just skipping the trot or the walk step. And the more that you go back to the basics, the less scary and exciting and stressful the flying changes will become. And, we get all sometimes desperate about making the flying change happen, where you're like, oh, I have to get a flying change today. But usually that doesn't work very well. So I can't stress enough, go back. 90% of your time is spent working on the basics, and only about 10% of your time is spent working on the flying changes. If you flip that equation and you suddenly start spending 90% of your time working on the flying changes, it's going to make your horse stressed and confused about it. So, let me know in the chat, are you seeing how with these smaller steps, riding the changes is possible for you and for your horse? Okay, I see lots of yeses. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this call, I'm so passionate about teaching this blueprint and teaching this step-by-step system for flying changes because I didn't know it at first. Like when I was kind of the blind leading the blind when I was teaching my first horse Trumpet how to do the flying changes. I know that I made a lot of mistakes with him, that I skipped a lot of steps, that I confused the heck out of him, that I stressed myself out. And I teach a lot of clinics, and I also know that I see a lot of riders that are, at second level, like they've done second level. They really want to do third level. They want to get their bronze, and the flying change is that one thing holding them back from moving up to the next level. And it doesn't need to be that way. Every horse can do a flying change. It's their natural way of rebalancing when they're out in the field cantering around, they can do it. The trick is just how do we get them to do it on our cue, on our aids? So that was a lot of information that I just threw at you over the last 55 minutes. And here's the thing, I really want you to be successful with implementing what you've learned today. I kind of taught you the why it's important. But I would like to, if Uwe would be okay with you, take a few minutes to talk to you about my Flying Changes Made Simple course, because I really want to show you how I've kind of put all of this information together, teach you step by step all of the basics, all of the exercises. All right, I see a lot of you are like, okay, we'd like to hear about Flying Changes Made Simple. So this is a course that will take you step by step towards clean, correct, and on the aids flying changes in just 6 months, because teaching the changes does not need to hold you back from reaching your goals. So basically, the way this course works is the first part of the course is all about the basics. The second part of the course is about the exercises to teach the flying changes. And then the third part of the course is all about perfecting your flying changes. This course is for you if you're dreaming of flying changes, you want to improve your flying changes, you're trying to teach your horse the flying changes, you have a schoolmaster, or if you have a problem with your flying changes, like late behind, bucking, anticipating. It really is a program of flying changes from start to finish. And I show you behind the scenes of actually teaching the flying changes. So I'm not just using horses that already do perfect flying changes. I'm taking you through that journey of teaching horses flying changes. The first part of the course is all about flying changes theory, where I help you understand when are you ready, which lead should you teach first, because that's important. What are the aids? What should your legs, seat, hands, how many half halts to do, all of that. Timeline and expectations for teaching the flying changes. And then finally, which of the exercises will work best for your horse. And as Callie is one of our students, she was pretty intimidated. Like, am I ready? I don't know. How to ask for the flying change? But this course really breaks it down step by step. So going into detail, every little basic that you need before you're ready for the flying changes, every detail about the aids, all the problem solving, all of that. And for those of you who are not there yet, you're like, well, I want to do flying changes, but I'm nowhere near ready. Now is the time to work on your basics. Now is the time to perfect your canter transition, to work on the canter quality. You don't want to wait until you're ready for flying changes to start working on this stuff, or it's not going to work. And this is a picture of my first horse, Achilles. You can see my scores are pretty bad. I was getting like 57% at second level. And I wasn't ever able to teach Achilles the flying changes. Why? Because I my basics weren't good enough. My canter quality wasn't good enough. He was on the forehand. My simple changes weren't good enough. And, you know, so even if you're not ready, really starting now with improving your canter will get you ready. It's taking those little baby stair steps so that you can reach your goal of riding flying changes. And our student Paula, she joined the course. She wasn't ready to start with the flying changes, but her canter became more engaged and uphill. She really worked on her self carriage and improving the counter canter. Okay, so here's what we have so far in the Flying Changes Made Simple course. I want to make sure that you understand everything that's inside the course. So the first thing is the flying changes theory. Second thing is the basic exercises, everything that you need to do before you start working on the flying changes. I'm going to give you a really good deal today, but I just want you to understand the value. So total value, $798. If I think about all of the lessons I've taken, all of the horses I've worked with, definitely I wish that I had had all of that information before I started teaching the changes. So once your basics are correct, you need a toolbox full of different patterns to set your horse up for the flying changes. I taught you one today, but there's a lot more. And what's super cool about this course, one of the big reasons I made this course is because I've ridden with some of the best trainers in the world. Jo Hinneman, Stefan Peters, Carl Hester, Conrad Schumacher. Each of these trainers has a little bit of a different pattern that they use to teach the flying changes, which I think is very cool and very interesting. And so I put all of those different exercises that I've taken from different trainers, compiled them into the course. There's videos, there's diagrams, everything that you need to really learn the exercise and go out and implement it. But like I mentioned, what happens is your horse starts to anticipate one exercise or they start to have a different problem. Then you need to try a different pattern. And let me save you the time and frustration. Um, One thing that I'm so grateful for are the amazing trainers that I've had and all of the different exercises that they've taught me because with such a big toolbox and all the exercises in the Flying Changes Made Simple course, you're going to know what to do and how to change the exercise when your horse starts to anticipate. And the thing with flying changes is that you really don't want to teach them the wrong way. You don't want to let your horse come up with a bad habit or an evasion in the flying changes. Otherwise, it takes a long, long time to fix and to correct. So Hannah and her PRE Valiente, they're one of our students, and Valiente kind of learned the flying changes late behind at first, and he also would get really hot and really start anticipating. So it was a challenge for Hannah to teach Valiente the flying changes. And she loved the Flying Changes Made Simple course because there were so many different exercises in there that she would kind of work on one and then he would start to learn and anticipate with one exercise, but she had so many different patterns in there that she could just try a different one. And that really helped with his issue of anticipating and changing late behind. And I put all of the exercises into a convenient PDF, which you can print, download, take with you to the barn because I know sometimes that you learn it at home and then you go to the barn and you're like, hey, what am I supposed to be practicing? Okay, so here's what we have so far. The theory, the basic exercises, the patterns for the flying changes, the cheat sheet, total value $1,795. Like I mentioned, I have a really good price for today. But it's definitely worth that amount. If I was to either if you were to come into training with me or if you were to go around and try to learn all of these different exercises by taking clinics, it would take you it would cost you at least that much money. Inside of the course, there are real life flying changes. And yes, there are some videos in there of Natasha, the Tempe change machine, but there's also videos of me teaching the flying changes. So this here is Leo with his front legs crossed and him kicking up behind. And I have a lot of videos of Leo getting him ready for the changes, teaching him the changes, everything that we kind of went through. And there's even one day in there where I think I titled the video "When the Unicorn Doesn't Fly." And I had planned, like, oh, I'm going to film flying changes with Leo for my flying changes course. And just didn't happen. It was a day that was like, okay, we need to go back on the work on the basics because he was just distracted. So it's real life teaching the changes. Let me know in the chat. I know we did this, but when you ask for a flying change, what does your horse do? Like, what is that one hurdle that you're struggling with that you're like, I just can't get my horse. Okay, my horse kicks out, my horse bucks. Okay. Well, you're in luck because the next part of the course is all about troubleshooting the flying changes. So this part of the course is really cool where I say, okay, if your horse bucks, do this exercise. If your horse is late, do this. If your horse anticipates, do this. If your horse trots, do this. Because like I mentioned, I've taught a lot of horses and riders how to do the flying changes. And I have dealt with all of the issues that you all are typing in the chat. So for those of you who have a confirmed change and you're ready to start working on tempi changes, half pass zigzags, one tempis, all of those fun things once you have a single change, there's also a section of the course that's all about advanced flying changes. So Renee's one of our students and she always was able to get a single change, but then when it came time to the tempi changes and figuring out how to count the tempis and set her horse up for the tempis, she was really struggling. So we break that down. We show you how to count those tempi changes. And Renee was actually able to get some eights on her flying changes, which is very cool. So congratulations, Renee. Okay, so here's what we have so far. We have the flying changes theory, the basic exercises, the patterns, the troubleshooting, the advanced flying changes, total value $3,641. Like I mentioned, going around riding with all the clinicians, going to shows, it would definitely cost you that much to get all this information. One last thing I added to the course, for those of you who have already taken the course, this is added in for you. I recorded ride along podcast for the flying changes. So basically these podcasts, you can download them, put them in your ear, and I talk you through a few of that different patterns that you might want to use, which is really helpful. Everyone loves the ride along podcast. Okay, so here's what we have inside the flying changes course. We have the flying changes theory, the basic exercises, the patterns, the troubleshooting, the ride along podcast, total value $3,641. So, like I said, this is like I feel like it's a compilation of everything I've learned in decades of training horses and teaching a lot of horses how to do the flying changes. So, if all the flying changes course did was to teach you how to develop a balanced, active, and engaged canter, would it be worth it? What do you think? Would it be worth it to have a more balanced, active, engaged canter? Okay, I see some yeses in the chat. If all the flying changes made simple course did was to give you confidence to try a flying change, to not be afraid to try one, would it be worth it? Okay, Anne says yes. If all the flying changes made simple course did was to confirm your flying changes so you could finally move up to the next level, would it be worth it? Okay, I see a lot of you saying yes, it would. And let me ask you this, how long have you been trying to teach the changes unsuccessfully? How long have you been struggling with those flying changes? What would it be worth to feel like this? So Rita says, today I tried changes from the shallow loop. First time I have gotten clean changes in both directions easily and without rushing afterwards. Okay, I see a lot of you have been struggling with this for years. So the regular price of the course is $4.99, but as a special fall deal, we're giving an additional $100 off when you sign up for Flying Changes Made Simple this week. So that means that you can get the entire course the theory, the exercises, the cheat sheet, the patterns, all of it for just $399. I'll have my team put that link in the chat if you would like to sign up. It's amelianewcomb.com/flying changes course. And there's also a payment plan. So you can get started today for just $173 plus two additional monthly payments if you prefer to do the payment plan. But like I said, when I created this course, it was such a passion project of mine because I want to help you. I want to share all of these exercises that I've learned and everything I've learned from teaching dozens and dozens of horses and riders the flying changes because it doesn't need to be so difficult. You just need the blueprint. You need the step-by-step system. I really want you to be successful in teaching the flying changes. So when you sign up today, you'll get instant access. There's over 45 pre-recorded video exercises. You also get USDF credit. There's a mobile app so you can access it on the go. There's an opportunity in there to ask any questions that you have. And the best thing is you have lifetime access to all of this content. So if you are, oh gosh, well, I really want to do flying changes, but I'm a year away, or I'm not quite there yet. I know I need to spend some more time on my basics. I would definitely say it's worth it so that you can start learning the blueprint, so you can start understanding the system and the aids. And that way, when you're ready, you have this all already in your mind. Um, if you sign up before the end of the webinar, you will also get access to my half halt workshop, which is a lot of fun. There's a half halt demo video in there of me working with young horses, older horses, long horses, short horses, and half halts are definitely an important part of setting up for the flying changes. So if you sign up right now, head over to amelianewcomb.com/flying changes course. That will be added to your enrollment. You will also get my half pass workshop. So this is not sold separately, but this half pass workshop has all of the preparation exercises, the aids, different exercises and patterns to work on half passes, troubleshooting. Half passes and flying changes are kind of two exercises that go together. Working on the half passes, especially canter half passes, can help you with your flying changes. So those two do go hand in hand. And if you are not quite ready for the flying changes, there's a couple different options for you. One is at checkout, there's an optional add-on for my round and canter workshop. That would be a good one to add on if you're still struggling to get your horse round in the canter, if you still need help with picking up the canter, that's a great one. You can also purchase that separately if you just want to focus on round and canter first. But here's the thing, like I mentioned, a big part of the course is the basics. The better your basics and the more that you really have a high standard for the basics, the easier it's going to be when you are ready for the flying changes. You don't want to wait until you want to start teaching the flying changes and then realize that you have to go back to the basics and fix all this stuff before you can even start working on the flying changes because your basics just aren't good enough. I have had, this number's a little old, but I can't believe that I have had over 10,000 students in my online programs. And here's one of our students, Crassy says, Amelia's worth 10 trainers. I've saved thousands on lessons. I have clear understanding and quieter horses. And, when I first started making YouTube videos, I had no idea that I would actually be able to help you with your horse over the internet, that I would be able to teach you things like flying changes. But what's really interesting about online learning is that it's a completely different way of learning. And in some ways, it's a more effective way of learning. So if you think about if I'm teaching you a lesson, and especially with flying changes, like if I'm trying to teach you how to do a flying change, I have to say what I'm first of all, I have to see it, then I have to process it, then I have to explain it to you, then you have to communicate it to your horse, and then I have to see it again. So it's not really that efficient of a system. And given that the flying change happens in a millisecond, it happens in that moment of suspension, you really need to take that responsibility on yourself to understand the aids, to understand the preparation, to understand the prerequisites and the basics that you need to have in place so that if you're lucky enough to have a lesson, which I know a lot of you ride alone a lot and you don't have a coach, but that way, if you are in a lesson, that you have the blueprint, that you have the understanding of how to ask, when to ask, what you need to do to get your horse ready. So, two choices at this point. Either keep working on the flying changes alone, which is totally fine. And I hope that I gave you a lot of good information today. Give me a thumbs up if you learned something and if you're excited about taking action on at least one thing that we covered today. Okay, Emma says yes. You're the best, Emma. Thank you for that. Option number two is to get help. And the course does come with a 30-day money back guarantee, which we always have in there. So you can totally try it out, sign up, head over to amelianewcomb-dressage.com/flying changes course. If it's not for you or you feel it's over your head, then just shoot us an email and we'll give you your money back. But what I will say is that part of what has made me successful and the way that I have learned this blueprint and the way that I have been able to teach dozens of horses and dozens of riders how to do the flying changes is because I got help. Because I went to trainers that had trained many, many horses how to do the flying changes, and I learned from them. I learned the exercises that they did. I learned the basics that they needed. And I can guarantee you that I would not be as successful as I am today if I hadn't invested in that education and if I hadn't gotten help from people who'd done it before me. Otherwise, it's just the blind leading the blind. Like you just don't know what you don't know. This is one of our students, Shaughnessy, and she's done a bunch of my courses, but I was so proud of Shaughnessy that she was able to get her bronze medal on her horse. And you can see her scores there, 61% at third level test two, which is just such a huge accomplishment to be able to get the flying changes, get them clean in a show, and achieve her gold medal. So congratulations, Shaughnessy. I know she worked really, really hard at it and she's just such a great student and lovely horses. And remember that teaching the flying changes is not linear. A lot of times, what I've noticed happen is that you do your basic work, and then sometimes when you first teach the changes, you have what I call beginner's luck. I had this with Kensington. The first few times I was like, oh, he did the change. It's going to be fine. It's going to be easy. Then it goes into this downward spiral where your horse starts to overthink and over anticipate and gets worried and everything kind of goes wrong. And in that downturn, in that sinking, bad time of flying changes, that is where you really need the support, is when you start to feel like things are falling apart or you're hopeless or this is never going to happen. That's when you have to have that toolbox full of different exercises, different systems, and also, one thing with the course too is that you can ask me your questions inside of there. So, hey, Amelia, like my horse is doing this, I'm struggling with this, I need help, what should I do? That can save you a lot of time and a lot of struggle. Um, because when you're struggling and ready to give up, like Renee was, that is where it's so helpful to have resources that can help you out, that can give you a new exercise or something new to think about. And that's also why inside the course I do show you the real process of teaching the flying changes, not just the good days, but also the mistakes and what I do when my horse is tense or when my horse is anticipating or when my horse is changing late behind. What do you do? So believe in your horse. There is a clean change in there. So no one ever would have thought that Sparky or Kensington would be able to do the flying changes. But I hope that what you got out of this is that there is a step-by-step system. There is a blueprint to teaching the flying changes. And the better that you understand all of the baby steps, the more successful you'll be. What holds many, many riders back is that they just one day decide, oh, I'm going to do a flying change, and they haven't followed the process. So no wonder the horse gets scared, they get scared. It becomes this big ordeal when it really doesn't need to be that way. So remember that you get $100 off when you join before next Sunday, October 12th. If you are going to join, I definitely recommend signing up during this webinar so you can get the half halt workshop and also the half pass workshop. Head over to amelianewcomb-dressage.com/flying changes course. I will have my team put that link in the chat for you. This is what the checkout page looks like. So you can just put in your name and your information. It does say $4.99 up here, but if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that you get that $100 discount applied. So when you sign up for today, it's just $3.99. There's also the payment plan if you prefer to get started today for just $173 plus 2 additional payments. And then these are 2 optional add-ons. So if you want the round and canter workshop, you can check that box. There's also a transitions workshop if you want some more help with your transitions. And oh yeah, we have our ride along podcast. Thank you all for being here today. I hope that you enjoy this as much as I do. I always love talking about horses and learning. And listen to this podcast during your next ride. I go over the basics to help get you ready for asking for your first flying change. And I believe that we have some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. And I think there have been some questions, I'm sure, Nicole.
Yes, for sure. Definitely one of them was, how do I get the coupon to apply? You just scroll down to the bottom. It should already be applied. And then you already mentioned it, the Ride Along podcast, your free gift is in the chat. So definitely check that out and link it, and it will save directly to your favorite podcast player. So definitely get that one. And then the biggest questions that came through, there's 2 big questions that came through. What is the timing for the canter aid? And then what is the timing for the flying change aid? So in the canter stride or in the trot stride, what moment, can you go walk us through what moment do we ask for the canter? I guess it's the walk to canter really, because we're talking about simple changes. And then at what point in the canter stride do we ask for the flying change?
Yes. So for the trot to canter or the walk to canter, you want to ask when the outside hind leg is on the ground because that's when the horse is able to push off and like basically jump all 4 feet off the ground and do that change. And then for the flying change aid, it's going to be the same thing. So but what I do is I think it's important not to overthink it too much. So if you're going like trot to canter, I usually think about getting in time with the inside front because that's also when the outside hind is on the ground. So I'm going like trot, 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 half halt, canter. And then if you're going to do the flying change, um, here's how I do it. I think of like canter, 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 change. And I think of asking on the when the inside front is on the ground, on the downbeat, because then in the next stride, the horse is jumping up off the ground, and that's when they're going to do the change. But I go through all of that in more detail inside of the course to help you really get that count and that timing and that understanding. And also the better control of your canter, of the quality, and also of the adjustability in your canter, the easier that timing becomes. So usually it's more about working on the balance and the engagement of the canter that helps you with your timing more than just focusing on the timing.
Yeah. And I think that also goes back to, thinking about our rhythm, right? If our canter rhythm, or if our basics aren't there, we can't ourselves can't go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because our canter's going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's changing all over the place. And
Yeah.
that's why our rhythm
Yeah.
is so important and having that adjustability. Can you go over? There's a few hunter jumpers on the line, which is great. We love seeing people from other disciplines who are exclaiming how they used to learn how to do their changes or teach changes over a pole. Can you describe a little bit why that isn't biomechanically the best place and why?
Yeah, so it I mean it can be helpful because what going over a pole does, I don't like to teach the changes over a pole, but I do like to sometimes practice cantering over a pole because it gets you more volume and more air time. But when horses canter over a pole, it a little bit changes the rhythm, and I find that if I ask for it over a pole, a lot of times the horse will change late behind or not on the aid. So that's why I usually don't do it that way. What do you think? Because you had a theory on that too, Nicole.
Yeah, well, because you are right. When you're in the air, you have all this suspension. There's all this time for the horse to change.
Yeah,
But when you actually think about a jump stride, a pole stride, or a can't like it's not actually in the moment of suspension in the canter. It's in between. Like the horse goes hind, other
yeah,
hind, like they push off, like they're
yeah,
pushing off like that. So when they're in the air, it's not actually in the correct biomechanic moment that we ask for a change, flying change in our flat work. And
yeah.
that's why sometimes it's not the best place to ask. If you're starting to teach the horse, and so they're trying to get the idea of doing something, I agree with you.
Mm,
It's, hey, something, it's here, we're doing something different. But biomechanically, it isn't the best place because they do learn how to change behind
yeah.
late. But
But
it's
if
a
you
great,
follow,
yeah.
yeah, and if you follow like all of the basics that we show you in the course and then all of the exercises, you shouldn't need to use a pole. Because it's really about getting more jump and more activity in the canter, and that's gonna clean up your flying change.
Yeah, for sure. And then some people were asking, do you do virtual lessons or how do they learn more from you? What would you suggest?
I would suggest that you join Strides. Strides is our monthly membership program, and in Strides, we have video review every single month where you can send in your videos, and my team and I review them, and that's really the best way to get started. Those video reviews work amazingly well. And definitely, once you sign up for Flying Changes, there is a link in there if you wish to join Strides so that you can send in your video and get a little bit more of that personalized feedback.
Yeah. And I think people will be surprised how much you don't need virtual lessons when you have the course and how it's
Yeah.
explained in a way to ask questions, when you have the exercises to go practice and do.
Yeah.
Someone asked me the other day, "Oh, who do you ride with?" And I was like, "I ride with Amelia." And she goes, "Oh, I didn't know she did virtual lessons." I was like, "Well, she doesn't, not in that way." But so they really are, the courses are very in depth and do give you that step by step,
Yeah.
almost better, like because like that's like you said, it's not everything can be jam packed into one lesson.
And you don't have to
Um,
deal with the technology of setting
oh,
up for a virtual lesson, which is so hard to do. Like you have to have the right Wi-Fi and video. And then for me as an instructor, I find that sometimes the virtual lessons are more frustrating because it will like freeze or be super blurry. And then especially with flying changes, you're like, yeah, I have no idea if that was clean or what happened there. So honestly, film yourself, like get a Pivo, film yourself, and then if you want that one-on-one feedback, put it in Strides and we can give you that one-on-one feedback.
yeah. So Jeannie's asking, yes, that's Strides is where we do the video review feedback. So definitely think about Strides. Someone's asking, I'm currently in the 38 to round course, also in Strides. They're saying these lessons have been a game changer for them. So that's great. That's so nice. I think we hit most of our questions already then. It's not very often we get to the end of the questions
All
before the
right.
timer runs out.
Well, let's
Um,
see if anyone would like to see inside of the course. Maybe we should do that. And then do you want to call out some names? Have we had
yeah,
new
we have,
students sign up?
yeah, so we have Marcia, Deborah as well, Karen, Georgia, Mary, Ann, Carol, Karina, Lori. Let's see who else. Megan, Courtney has joined Round and Canter.
Awesome.
Cheryl, Christia, Monica, Selena, Jan, Terry, Kathy, Kimberly, and the list keeps going. So it's
Very
wonderful.
cool. All
Yeah.
right, so this is what the sale page will look like. So that's amelianewcomb .com/forward slash flying changes made simple special offer. We'll put that link in the chat, and we also emailed it, right, Nicole?
Yes, it's also
Yeah.
emailed in your inbox.
Awesome. So check your inbox if you're having trouble grabbing it from the chat. You can learn more about the course here. So there's kind of some more information. Then you just can click that Enroll Now button and it will take you over where you can put in your information. Once you join the course, you will, if you're new, you'll get an email to set up your account with at ameliasdressageacademy.com. So ameliasdressageacademy.com, where you'll log into the course and you'll get instant access to all of the course. So this is what it looks like inside of the Flying Changes Made Simple course. And you want to get started with the introduction. And then this is kind of the theory and setup. So what is a flying change? Best practices. What are the aids? Rider position. What should your hands be doing? There's some inspiration to get you started. There's the ride along podcast. And then there's also the flying changes cheat sheet. So one thing I do with my courses, I really want them to be as easy for you to digest and absorb and apply the information as possible, which is why we have the ride along podcast and the cheat sheet. Then the whole first section, look at all these exercises are those basics and the prerequisites. So for those of you who aren't quite ready yet, and for those of you who are ready, you've got to work on the basics and really perfect all of these exercises. So you'll notice trot, canter, trot even. I had a student a few weeks ago and she was working on the flying changes and her horse wasn't quite getting it. And I was like, let's go back and just work on trot, canter, trot. And by clarifying and perfecting those transitions, it really helped her to clean up her flying changes. So remember, it's not just about doing bad flying change after bad flying change, it's going back to these basics. Then here's a bunch of those exercises that I talked to you about that I've learned over the past couple decades working with some really good trainers and clinicians. And some of these exercises work better for horses that anticipate or horses that kick or horses that buck. Then we have our troubleshooting, so late behind, anticipation, crooked. There's some videos of me training students, which is always super helpful. There's flying changes from the judge's view. I think you did that, didn't you, Nicole?
Yes, it was. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
that's
we've
going to
got
be
we've got a few
useful.
people who have originally bought flying changes from years back, and they're
Yeah.
saying, "Where about these updates? Where can I get these updates?" They are already made and in your account, so you just need to
Yeah.
go into the course and find them.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, then there's the advanced flying changes, how to improve your flying changes. So there's a lot inside the course. You will not be hungry for information, and you do have lifetime access to it. So that means that you can, take your time with those basics. You don't need to rush to doing the flying changes until you're really ready. But it's also, I always think it's good if you can be learning ahead of where you are. So even if you're not quite ready for changes, if you're thinking about now, like, what are the aids? What do I need to be thinking about? So that way, when you are ready, you kind of have it all in the back of your mind. That can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, so I think that's it for questions. A few people are asking for the link for the podcast, so I can send those out directly to you.
Awesome.
Things like that. They are only the free gift, Ride Along podcast gift is only available if you came live as a thank you for coming live.
Yes.
So if you're listening to this recording, unfortunately you missed out, but just try and come live next time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you to the rest of the team for being here today. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in Flying Changes. So, alrighty. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
All right. So I see some questions coming in, so I'm just gonna go through these real quick. Um, Is this a course appropriate for starting a young horse? No, not quite this one. This one, so you should be at least doing, training first level with your horse. What course would you recommend for starting a young horse? Amelia doesn't have a young horse starting course at the moment, but Groundwork Essentials is a really good place to start because it gives your horse a lot of the uh, basics and life skills that they need, as well as prepares them for riding. Jen says, thank you. Can't wait to start working on my changes. Clay says, is the half halt and half pass included? Yes. So those bonuses are included when you purchase it. Automatically, it's added to your account. So you'll see that show up in your course sections. And some people are linking the podcast. Yeah, and so just a friendly reminder for the $3.99 price, you just have to scroll down on the checkout page. The coupon should already have applied to that account, that checkout link. Emma said, did someone win an enrollment into the course? It wasn't, yes, they did. I can't remember their name off the top of my head, but we did email them just before the session started. And all right. I think I got to the end of those questions. Let me know if there's anything else that comes up, or otherwise we will head out. All right. Nothing's coming in. So we're going to head out. All right. Have a lovely day, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at support@amelianewcomedressage.com. Can't wait to see you in there. Bye now.